Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're cracking open the pages of a deeply, deeply mysterious document from 1677 known as the Mutus Liber, or the Mute Book. And it gets that name because it is an alchemical text that is completely devoid of words. It relies entirely on these incredibly intricate sequential engravings to convey its secrets. Today, we're focusing our lens specifically on plate 5. So get ready, because we're going to decode the hidden meanings behind these symbols, and we're going to uncover this absolutely fascinating framework that perfectly bridges 17th century chemistry with modern psychology.
Okay, let's dive into this. At first glance, plate 5 of the Mutus Liber, well, it just looks like a straightforward schematic for an early modern laboratory, right? I mean, you've got furnaces, glass flasks, and people hard at work. But what if I told you that this image is actually a blueprint? We're going to treat this plate exactly like a treasure map today. Because on the surface, sure, it's a recipe for purifying physical matter. But just beneath that surface, it holds a radically advanced code for purifying the human psyche.
So, here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, decoding the Mutus Liber. Second, inside the alchemist's lab. Third, the rule, solve et coagula. Fourth, Vulcan and the secret fire. And finally, number 5, the alchemy of the human mind.
All right, part 1, decoding the Mutus Liber.
So to really understand plate 5, you have to know what just happened right before it. In plate 3, the book established its cosmological theory, basically how energy moves from the heavens down to the earth. Then in plate 4, we actually saw our alchemists outside in a field. They were literally stringing up canvases to harvest raw celestial dew during the spring season. So now, in plate 5, the timeline shifts. The whole outdoor gathering phase, that's over. The raw materials have been collected, and the operations move strictly inside the laboratory. Basically, the time for gathering is done, and the time for intense, focused processing has just begun.
Let's move to and see how this builds in section 2, inside the alchemist's lab. Looking at the upper register, that's the top third of plate 5, you're seeing a real, highly functional fractional distillation setup. The alchemist here is using an athanor. Now, an athanor is a classic brick laboratory furnace that's designed to maintain a really steady heat. Atop this furnace sits a glass vessel, which is called an alembic. So that celestial dew they gathered outdoors, it gets placed inside and subjected to controlled heat. The liquid boils, the vapor rises, it condenses in the helm, which is the cap of the apparatus, and then it just drips right down into a receiving flask. They are literally, physically separating the volatile evaporative liquid from the fixed, heavy sediment left at the bottom. It's a very real, very physical chemistry experiment. But dropping down into the middle register of the plate, the dynamic changes a bit. We see the alchemist and his female partner, the soror mystica. This isn't just a solo job, it absolutely requires a crucial team dynamic. The alchemist is pouring that concentrated distillate they just made into a shallow dish, which is known as a cucurbit. But pay close attention to the soror mystica here. She's actively managing the vessel. She represents the absolute necessity of gentle thermal control. Alchemists call this ignis mansuetudinis, or the gentle heat of the moon. If that fire gets even slightly too aggressive, boom, the entire operation is completely ruined. So you might be wondering, why does it have to be so gentle? Well, it's because of the ultimate physical goal displayed here. They want to crystallize the secret nitrous salt of dew. Sometimes they call this the philosophical salt. As that incredibly gentle heat evaporates the liquid in the shallow dish, delicate crystalline structures begin to form. If the heat is too intense, the alchemists believed it would literally destroy the delicate, invisible celestial life contained right there within the dew. It was an operation that required absolute, unwavering patience and precision, just to coax that hidden salt out of the water.
Which leads us right into section 3, the rule, solve et coagula. So the crucial point is the famous alchemical axiom, solve et coagula, which means to dissolve and coagulate. Plate 5 is quite literally the textbook visual execution of this law. Every single action you see these figures taking is about breaking something down into vapor. That's the solve, the dissolving part, and then bringing it all back together into a purified physical form, the crystalline salt. That's the coagula. You take it apart, you remove all the impurities, and you put it back together stronger. To really ground this in scientific reality, let's think about the physical process for a second. Spring dew isn't just pure water, right? It contains microtrace nitrates, atmospheric dust, organic matter, the whole shebang. Through fractional distillation, the alchemist applies gentle heat to separate the pure, volatile water from those trace elements. Then, the heavy residue left at the bottom of the flask, that dark earthy matter, is calcined.
That means it's burned at a very high temperature to extract the fixed mineral salt. Finally, that newly purified fixed salt is recombined with the pure distillate. It's this beautiful, continuous loop of refinement. Moving along to Section 4, Vulcan and the Secret Fire. Okay, notice how we've suddenly dropped from a very literal, physical chemistry lab straight into the realm of Hermetic mythological philosophy? All of a sudden, we have Roman gods sitting right at the bottom of the page. On the bottom left, there's Vulcan, the divine blacksmith, tending his forge. He represents the raw, elemental, driving force of fire. Over on the bottom right sits Luna, the moon goddess. She represents the water and the gathered dew. And in an incredibly symbolic gesture, she's holding a swaddled infant. This whole bottom section perfectly illustrates the ultimate marriage of fire and water. But Vulcan's presence here requires us to understand a brand new concept, ignis in naturalis. See, Vulcan isn't just representing that physical brick furnace we saw up at the top of the page. He represents the hidden, secret fire. In alchemical philosophy, this is a non-physical fire that acts alongside the natural heat of the physical world. It's the spiritual, hermetic driving force that makes true transformation even possible. You need the physical fire to boil the water, for sure, but you need the secret fire to actually transform the essence of the material itself. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the infant held by Luna. This isn't just some random detail. No, this is the Filius Philosophorum, the philosophical child. Born of Vulcan's fire and Luna's water, this child represents the volatile spirit of the world, the spiritus mundi that they captured from the air back in Plate 4, finally taking on a semi-solidified physical form. The spirit has literally become matter. The alchemists are showing us here that their work has taken its very first successful step toward creating the legendary Philosopher's Stone. And that brings us to our final act, Section 5, Alchemy of the Human Mind. So the pioneering psychoanalyst Carl Jung realized something incredible. These alchemists were actually projecting their own subconscious minds onto the chemical matter in their flasks. The physical alchemy on the left, separating that volatile liquid from the fixed sediment, it perfectly mirrors the psychological alchemy on the right. Inside your own mind, this is the process of distinguishing between your volatile, temporary emotional flashes and your fixed, permanent character structures. The bifurcation of moisture in the lab is, quite literally, the bifurcation of the human psyche. Let's break down how you actually perform this mental distillation. The act of distillation represents actively sorting through the raw, completely unfiltered contents of your unconscious mind. Remember that dew they gathered outside? Those are the raw experiences and the insights you gather as you go through life. But you can't just keep them raw. They have to be brought into the laboratory of your mind, heated by the friction of life, tested and refined. You keep what is true and valid, that is your pure distillate, and you intentionally, consciously discard the emotional debris, the toxic sludge, which the alchemists called the caput mortuum, or deadhead. And this brilliantly illustrates the rule of 3 that governs Plate 5. Because when you look at this single engraving, you are actually reading it through 3 stacked lenses all at the same time. Lens 1 is the literal physical chemistry of taking things apart and putting them back together. Lens 2 is the Hermetic philosophy, where divine forces like the secret fire drive the universe. And Lens 3 is Jungian psychology, where that laboratory apparatus is actually your own brain, working tirelessly to differentiate and purify your psyche.
Just let this thought sink in for a second. The philosophical child symbolizes the emergence of the new self. Through conscious psychological work on raw emotional material, a resilient core identity is born. That strange little infant being held by the moon goddess at the bottom of the plate, that is you. That is the new, solidified, purified version of yourself that emerges only after you have done the hard, highly conscious work of putting your raw emotions through the furnace. Which leaves us with a final, absolutely vital question. What raw emotional dew are you currently trying to process and distill in your own life? The Mutus Liber might have been printed way back in 1677, but its laboratory is wide open, and it is operating inside your head right now. Are you letting your emotions boil over and scorch the flask, or are you applying that gentle heat to extract the crystal clear truth of who you really are? Take that thought with you today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.